Yeah.
Try going on Google Hangouts. We're good, Jeff. You can go back to the presentation.
What's that?
You can go back to the presentation. I'm good. Sorry, I messed up your computer.
Got it. Thank you.
It does look a little different. No. Transition. Maybe yes, they were now presenting. We're finding material. That's the
I can film another one.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
do
you send
that
that.
real quick.
To which email?
Sorry?
I'm on the JAY.
Okay.
My house on today. Oh, how about the other side of the chair? Yeah, there you go, perfect. Sorry. Rebecca's going to move to chair us that house.
Good, how are you?
That's the water. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna call things to order here. My name is Jeff Stansler, one of the faculty for the Mission Student Caucus course, along with Jeff Kupperman and Michael Fay and Jay McDowell. I want to welcome you all here, and we're very pleased and honored to have several both representatives and NGO representatives and folks linked with the university in different capacities here to help as panelists. They'll be coming and going over the course of the morning, but right now I want to briefly introduce we have Mike Larkins, who's from
Mike Latvis from Government Relations at University of Michigan Dearborn.
Bob Murphy, I'm with the Michigan Association of State Universities and previously spent 7 years at the State Budget Office.
Rebecca.
Rebecca DeVoe with the University of Michigan Government Relations Office.
And then our chair.
I'm Andy Shore, I'm a state representative from here in Lansing, and class of '97 U of M.
And I'm Erin Shore. I'm with Michigan Community College Association, '99, and then Statistical Policy.
Welcome one and all. The panelists who have all been here in previous occasions to help us out know the basic format for the rest of the caucus members. We'll be going thematic area by thematic area, and in each case, we'll be hearing from two of the two proposals that you all chose collectively to represent the various our platform overall and the various thematic areas individually. They'll be presenting, and you can hopefully see as they walk through their presentations, and then our panelists will be asking questions about the various proposals. First, I want to make sure before we segue on to anything else, If you haven't signed in, please make sure you do that. So I'll turn things over to Representative Shore.
All right. I get to bang the gavel, which I don't ever get to do, so that's why I love this. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to chair this for now. We're going to have some reps and senators coming and going. We have committees and other responsibilities, but I always look forward to this, and so welcome. We're excited to hear the proposals. The first proposal up is the one under the basic rights and needs category. You want me to list everybody on here, or you want me to start bringing people up?
Maybe we just bring people up. So our topic coordinators are David Greenbaum, Mary Gressman, and Rahul Dole.
I don't think the audio is working, so you just have to kind of speak up.
Okay. So good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be here today. My fellow topic coordinators, Rahul Dole and David Greenbaum, as well as myself, Mary Gressler, have worked specifically in the basic rights and needs group. A few major topics that we've covered are healthcare, affordable housing, and of course, the Flint water crisis. Today, we are presenting two outstanding proposals. However, there were several other notable proposals considered, including mandated vaccinations among students, as well as mental health treatment and awareness.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Eden Spitzer and Josh Ehrlich, who will be presenting their proposal on the Rural Mental Health Rotation Grant.
Hello, members of the committee. Thank you for meeting us today. Hope you're having a good morning so far. So let's get right into it. The main problem that we are addressing is the lack of primary health care in rural regions of Michigan. So as you can see, can you see the slides also? Yeah. So as you can see, especially in northern Michigan, highlighted by the cream colored area, more than half of Michigan is considered to be rural, according to the Department of Technology, Management, and Budget. And we believe that healthcare is a basic right as a citizen. And currently, that's a right that is not being addressed and people do not have access to. And we believe that primary healthcare is an integral part of any sustainable, flourishing city, urban area, and that without a primary healthcare foundation, these areas would not be able to grow socially and economically as they should.
We have copies of this.
Okay.
All right. We have copies.
So to start, we'll describe the problem briefly. So basically, the American Academy of Family Physicians says that there should be a ratio of about 1,200 to 1 in terms of people to primary care physicians. And in a lot of the Michigan rural areas, it's gotten bad enough to the point where the ratios are reaching up to thousands and thousands of people per primary care physician. And an additional problem that we're trying to solve with this proposal, as we'll describe in a bit, is that the average medical student's debt after finishing school is about nearly $200,000, which is huge. And so monetary incentives come into play here with this proposal. So the solution ultimately is to bring accessible healthcare to areas that don't really have accessible healthcare right now. And the monetary incentive I mentioned before is a $35,000 loan forgiveness for a medical student performing or doing 4 months of their training in a rural medical facility. So they would spend the 4 months there, like part of their third year of medical school. And then hopefully the idea is that they will end up staying in the areas that they practice in. Ultimately, we want to encourage people to move to these rural areas and feel as though that they, that they understand the area and that they can, contribute after the 4-month program. So we'd like to open it up to any questions.
Questions from the panel?
Sure. So
So you want to give $35,000, really $35,000 in medical loans to students who just participate in a 4-month program.
Yeah,
So, you know, if I was a student and I only had to spend 4 months to get $35,000 and not be required to stay there afterwards, I'd take $35,000 and go wherever I wanted.
yeah. So we didn't outline it exactly in the slides, but there's an official application process, and not every single person who applies is going to be admitted. So hopefully through a screening process, they'll be able to tell, and there's a committee that is to be created within this proposal as well, to sort of determine who is the best fit for where. And so that matching process, we feel as though, you know, will hopefully bring kids or students who are more inclined to stay in the areas. Also, I might point your attention to like a program that's very similar in Minnesota. The only difference is that there's a larger time commitment for those medical students. It's 45 weeks per year, 30 hours per week for 3 years. So it's much more extensive. However, they've seen really, really great results since 2001. They've seen 326 physicians and dispersed all over these rural areas. And so we feel like this is kind of not as extensive or as costly, yeah. But hopefully, you know, we'll always get some of that of those people to stay over.
Do you have an estimate on what the cost would be and where the money is going to come from?
Sure. So for each student, it's $35,000 that we'd be forgiving in their loans, and we ended up calculating based on projected numbers of people who would apply. All of these numbers were like compiled, and an ultimate number that we reached, including payment for the committee, is $3.2 million per year. That figure we believe should, like, it's going to decrease over time also because, like, ideally we would have, like, there's only, sorry, I'm having a difficult time explaining it, but there's only like 60 to 100 primary care physicians that need like spots to be filled in these rural areas to sort of fix the ratios. So over time, as we see more and more people going into these areas, you know, that number will ultimately decrease once we see increases in the numbers of physicians in those areas.
Well, first and foremost, I think that this idea, this suggestion definitely raises the bar for this class, so I commend you on this is definitely a public policy issue that is extremely legitimate, and I think that I think that you guys have used other examples from other states that are successful, and so I commend you on that. I think that, did you look into when, specifically in Minnesota, and then Michigan already has some programs for this, did you look into any of the types of private partnerships or nonprofit partnerships that have already been established?
I'm not sure on certain figures for private partnerships. A lot of we have a clause in our proposal for like institutions like the University of Michigan or Michigan State, or those, if they have those private donations, they could relinquish them over to the committee for usage for our funds for this program. Because these universities, and I think Wayne State, I'm not sure, but all of them have a certain portion of funding for these loan forgiveness programs privately. So part of it is like an incentive clause to have these funds relinquished over to the official committee that will be part of, you know, just solving this problem. And hopefully that will, you know, help us with the cost as well.
The program in Minnesota is state funded solely.
So is it, were they in federally qualified health centers, or were they in individual primary care physician offices?
In Minnesota.
In Minnesota, where did you see where the physicians were
remember?
stationed?
They were covered, it was primary health care, it was pediatrics, it was gynecology, it was private practices, it was.
So I guess it was like a range.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yep. And then we'll probably need to move on to the next one.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you walk me through briefly, what's the cost of the program in Minnesota that you compared this to, and how many roughly students and residents does it reimburse? And B, how did you get from a 3-year rotation down to a 4-month kind of parachute into the community?
Sure. So I had the figures, I can't seem to find them right now, but when we spoke to consultations about how to design this program, and speaking to a couple of medical students who are now post-medical school and in residency, they sort of helped us with the logistics in terms of how we should structure the program to make it attractive for somebody to want to do it. And while the program in Minnesota worked, based on our conversations with these people, they felt as though like a stint in the area would be sufficient for them to sort of motivate others to follow suit and then ultimately end up there. So that, I mean, like both of us are from Los Angeles, and we sort of had to, like, in terms of the logistics of medical schools here and you know how best to do it, we had to speak to the consultations and sort of took their word for it.
So by consultations, you mean doctors that are practicing or residents that have gone through?
Residents that have gone through.
So you talk to people who, you essentially ask students, how much money would you like and how little would you like to report?
I don't think I phrased the question that way to them, but I guess, yeah, I mean, to them it was just like how to incentivize a medical school student to participate.
All right, before I need to move on, I think this is a good proposal. You should speak to a gentleman named Ned Canfield, who's a state representative, primary care doctor. He's got a similar proposal, although that is not 4 months, but
Yeah.
good job, guys. All right.
Thank you.
Like to introduce the next one?
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you again for having us here in Lansing. It's always just a pleasure to come down from Ann Arbor to speak to you all. So really thank you for giving up your time. As Mary mentioned earlier, my name is Rahul Dole. I'm also another topic coordinator for the Basic Rights and Needs group. And I have the pleasure of introducing Corey Vaca and Charlie Sprarigan. They're going to talk to you about increasing the transparency of healthcare costs here in Michigan. So without further ado.
Welcome, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. My name is Charlie Sprarigan, and I'm here with Corey Vaca. Together, we've created a proposal named Increasing Transparency of Healthcare Costs. I'm sure all of you on this commission would agree that health and safety of Michigan residents is of paramount importance. Similarly, we can all agree that taking every step possible to help Michigan residents get access to a healthier life is equally as important. Unfortunately, the rising cost of healthcare within the state has made this objective extremely difficult. In essence, high costs have led many Michigan residents to forego purchasing health insurance. This insurance, which provides many residents with the necessary preventative and restorative care to keep them healthy, is far too expensive. Currently, 7.8% of Michigan residents, or 790,000 individuals, live without health insurance. Of this figure, 393,000 are under the age of 49. Because both Corey and I know how important easy access to healthcare is for the future and safety and prosperity of the state, we drafted our proposal to drive down the cost of healthcare within Michigan. In order to do so, we've sought to create a greater degree of competition within the healthcare market by requiring that all healthcare providers publicly list the cost of services they provide. This information would be housed centrally by the Michigan government in a database that all residents would have access to. The enforcement of this policy would fall to the Michigan government in order to ensure the consistency, accuracy, and validity of reporting. Therefore, in making this information more readily available to the public, it is our hope that increased competition will incentivize healthcare providers to lower their costs, ultimately providing Michigan residents greater access to health insurance. This policy would not, however, only benefit those who are uninsured. This policy would help to lower the cost of healthcare services and insurance throughout the entire state. Therefore, even those residents in good physical condition with few regular visits to healthcare provider would reap benefits from this policy eventually becoming law. Ultimately, this policy has been implemented in 28 other states, and all have experienced a decrease in overall healthcare costs. This fact gives us confidence that this policy could work in Michigan, where this legislation to get passed. It's important to note that our proposal has been influenced heavily by a bill Senator Jim Marlowe introduced to the Senate, which would help drive this type of change for the state. So with that background, Corey and I are open to answering any questions the commission might have about cost and funding, or perhaps information on how this policy has been adapted in other states other than Michigan. Thank you.
Again, I commend everyone for working on a very good issue and using other legislation. from other states. The other 28 states, what were some of the numbers? How did they show that healthcare costs were driven down? How did they come up with those figures?
Absolutely. So thank you for your approval. So I want to start by saying that a lot of the states that use metrics like insurance overall, premiums, co-pays, deductibles, how did that information change after this legislation was enacted? Now, of course, in certain areas, there wasn't much change. For instance, in Michigan, if you were to enact this policy, Ann Arbor probably wouldn't see much of a change because the hospital in Ann Arbor has public costs, as do many of the other providers. However, these other states, what they saw was a drop in this insurance figures, which was a result of the drop in overall cost of healthcare, so cost of certain procedures. For instance, if I could draw your attention to the slides, this is for the San Francisco Bay Area, so in California, which is one of the states that enacted the policy. You can see that, for instance, a colonoscopy in the same city could cost 10 times as much at one provider as at another. And what they saw over time was that there was some mediation between these two prices, right? Prices didn't automatically drop to the low. They also didn't rise to the high. They kind of fell below the mean of these, and so overall costs have fallen. So a lot of what it has to do with is individual procedures, which as those costs go down, we'll see insurance costs going down, which will either allow more Michigan residents to then become insured, or it'll help them to just get the regular care they need to have insurance.
I think this is a really interesting idea. How have other states handled getting these private entities to ensure both timely and accurate reporting of information?
Certainly. So a lot of what they did was they created special commissions or databases in which this information was housed. Now there is obviously going to be some lag time between the enactment of this legislation and the reporting from all of these physicians. But I mean, it's a process of creating a committee that will oversee and enforce this. It is something though. The force of law would be that any physician who fails to report this information can either lose his or her license or not be able to practice for a certain period of time. Really, the crux of this whole policy is that everybody has to get on board, because without everybody getting on board, there's a veil of secrecy. Being able to pierce this veil of secrecy is the only way that's actually going to drive costs down for healthcare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious if the two of you know of anything in the following sphere, which my fellow panelists will know a lot more about than I do. But my conjecture is that there was probably a fair amount of pushback from medical lobbies, from AMA, et cetera, kinds of locations. And I'm wondering if you have any sense about how that process evolved in terms of whether there's been more buy-in from the medical community to an idea like this, or is that continue to be something that's been resisted? If that's the case, my assumption is that it has been.
Certainly. So what I think we could all agree on is the reason that there would be any pushback from a physician-oriented sphere would be because of the fear of driving down profits, right? Because if we're going to lower costs around the state, that obviously means that physicians are going to do less well, right? The counter argument to that, however, is that as you lower prices and we see a greater demand for services, actually total revenue, total profit is driven up, right? Because even though the price is going down, the quantity of people purchasing these goods and services is going up. So there has been pushback, absolutely, and we do not have any information on how these individual governments went about kind of lobbying the lobbyists, so to speak. However, over time, because it has become the force of law, because it has been required, we've seen that physicians have gotten on board. They've realized that without getting on board, they are liable to lose their license. And so over time, it might be a struggle initially, but the policy does have its merits. It's worked in a lot of other states, and typically it could actually provide returns greater than what they're currently experiencing.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I'd like to echo Rebecca's comments. The two proposals so far have been very well done. It's been, I've been doing this for a number of years, and these have been very good so far. One thing I would ask you, but also to the rest of the student caucus, I'm going to ask every one of you if you have a cost estimate. So if you could just address it in your presentation, that would at least, nip me in the butt a little bit on that one. Compliance isn't free. That the state has to monitor and make sure that everyone's doing this, has to follow through on enforcement. That probably has some sort of cost. And
You make the guy out of the budget office, but he doesn't change.
It's permanent damage. It's permanent damage. And just for my own identification, as a second question, does the data reported is it useful, given that there's varying prices based on what insurance you might have. I just don't know.
Certainly. Okay, so let me address the cost and funding part first. So with cost and funding, it's hard to kind of nail down specific figures because we don't have that, for Charles and I personally, don't have the insight into kind of what a general committee will cost. However, really all we're asking for is creation of a central database and then the monitoring of that database, which of course is going to have costs. So since it was so hard for us to compute a figure exactly how much it would cost the state, we figured, well, could we approach it from the other end of, will this actually drive in some additional funding for the state that might be able to just then go right to these costs? Our logic was that as we see more and more individuals buying health insurance or just buying services from the physicians, there's obviously some tax revenue associated with that. And so what we thought was, over a period of a few years, as this policy starts to become law and as it is more widespread throughout the state, we would see that the additional tax revenue that comes in will at least subsidize part of the cost we're talking about. But a lot of the other states, we talked about the 28 other states, didn't have direct information on how much it cost them to enact this policy. So unfortunately, we don't have that specific number. I want to answer your second question, but I did forget it.
Is an average procedural cost or test cost, is it relevant given that there's different cost adjustments for insurance?
Absolutely, it's a great question. So you do pay a copay and premiums and all the other stuff, deductibles, when you go to the doctor. So costs drove down on average overall for healthcare procedures, right? So for colonoscopy, for instance. And so even though for individual insurers, like let's say Blue Cross Blue Shield, might not get any benefit because they already have the lowest cost possible, other insurers did. So that was my kind of going back to the Ann Arbor statement of Ann Arbor on average might not actually see lower costs, they might stay exactly the same, but in certain areas of Michigan, costs might go down. So the way the metric they used was how are overall insurance costs in the state going down to find that average. Does that make sense? Sure. Great. Thank you.
Nice job, gentlemen. One more question.
Corey?
Yes.
Where is your major?
I'm a business student.
Business student?
Yes.
Okay. Corey, you may want to think about becoming a lobbyist. You're kind of a good talker, Corey. I don't know if there was a lot of substance in there, but it was.
Right, exactly.
You got an answer, we'll go with that.
But great job, guys. I seriously cannot commend you enough for taking on some serious issues, and I think that it'll significantly help all of you, even though foreign policy is not the arena that you may be choosing. I do think that these are arenas as you whether you have kids, whether you go on to these different fields, to be able to talk about these issues and, not repeat everything that you hear on MSN or Fox.
Especially Fox. Thank you, gentlemen. Nice job. Call up the topic coordinators for quality of life, Adam Taxman and Danny Scheinbaum. Right.
Just want to thank you guys again for coming out and representing on behalf of us. We really appreciate it. It's been our second time here representing the caucus. It's been a highlight of, I think, speaking on behalf of both of us, both for our academic careers. Excited to present the two proposals on behalf of the quality of life thematic area. So in the quality of life thematic group, we address issues including the environment, both natural and artificially built surroundings, the arts, culture, and transportation. Before we present the two proposals on the platform, I want to mention a few other proposals we considered in the thematic area. One for requiring physical education classes for grades K through 6, and one for renewable energy subsidies for schools in Michigan. The first proposal we'll be presenting on behalf of our thematic topic area today is a proposal to create tax exemptions for clean energy users, and it's by the authors are Chance Horkey and Keith Knopf, who can come up here now.
Morning, everybody. All right, so we created a bill. It's a two-part bill. We wanted to, number one, improve the environment
improve the environment in Michigan, as well as create an economic stimulation. So the importance of it, we did our research and we found that there were similar bills in 32 states in America. And we thought that with the increase in pollution in Michigan, that there'd be an increase in severe weather, a higher death rate, and a poor quality there. And then in terms of the economy, there's been a similar bill on a national level, and the Obama administration projects that by cutting emissions by 30% by 2030, there will result in households saving up to $85 per year on energy bills. Similarly, Ohio has a similar bill on the state level that has shown 4% economic growth in comparison to Michigan's 2.6% over the same period.
Yeah, so basically just kind of thinking about taking a step back on where we kind of were coming from. We were brainstorming this idea. If you look at it, we're in the middle of kind of this nasty election cycle. Business growth globally and even in the country is looking a little bit muted, like outlook versus how it was. And we also have this horrible pollution problem. Looking at those three, which one can we directly help and attack most tangibly? And it was the environment. But as we're both business students, we wanted to try and tie in that background too. So we thought, how could we help both the environment and maybe stimulate a bit of trade and commerce in the state too? And that was giving tax incentives. At first, we thought these incentives might be best geared towards residential users, but then we thought if we want to increase like a stimulus type deal, then we should look towards businesses and more commercial users. Our hope is that, in businesses that are already in the state, if they look to to acquire, to implement use of clean energy, then that's going to help the environment and hopefully, the tax break that they're getting from the firm side, they'll do something positive with that. But then also, if this program is running and it's running well, maybe we can attract new business. So then from that point of view, not only are we getting new business, but then that new business is also going towards producing clean energy.
The problem that we identified, most particularly shocking, was that Michigan uses coal for 50% of its total electricity generation, as well as 30% of that electricity generation is going from nuclear power. So that is something we want to try to limit going forward. As one of the largest manufacturing states in the country, we thought that this lack of clean energy was something that could be detrimental. So we came up with a solution on two different fronts, one being the wind and biomass energy and the other being on solar energy. Our policy came from a similar bill in New Mexico. It would be a 1 cent tax credit per kilowatt hour applicable to the first 400,000 megawatt hours for wind and biomass energy, as well as a 4 cents tax credit per kilowatt hour applicable to the first 200,000 megawatt hours in solar energy.
And then I know you're costing data a bit. So, research that we got from the Taxation Revenue Department in the New Mexico bill showed that realized tax expenditures from these firms was approximately 61 million, whereas it could have been almost double that, 120 million. And realize that that's a big loss in foregone tax revenue for the state. But we think that you have to consider a number of other factors when you're kind of reconciling that figure. One of the consultations we did in this this project was speaking with our accounting professor and just kind of talking to her about costs and the determination of costs. And that while there's this monetary cost here, right, there's obviously going to be these intangible costs, and however you price those, do they outweigh this foregone tax revenue? So some of the things that might be intangible that you're going to have to consider are, if we don't address the environmental problem, and let's say, extreme weather becomes more frequent, are you going to have damage to infrastructure? If weather condition also becomes worse and you see, maybe higher temperatures and more visits to emergency rooms, that's another cost to the state. Also from this, the research from the Tax and Revenue Department, they actually were able to put monetized value on the reduction in pollution from wind and solar. So in total combined, they estimated that value to be a $403 million pollution reduction. Of course, they have whatever data and methods they did to find that number, but that was the number they produced. And that's going off of a total of 11 billion in CO2 tons reduced at these new sites that are implementing clean energy in New Mexico. So that's kind of a bit of a trade-off on the tax side.
Similarly, in terms of like how much it would cost them versus how much they'd make. They found that tax expenditures were only 14% of the real labor income improved by this bill in 2003-2012, and it would only be 28% of the maximum tax liability.
So are you proposing the credit be for the business that offers the energy or for the customer that's purchasing?
It would be for the business. So the business would create, like, so it'd be like for windmills and things like that, like systems to create the energy within the state. So it'd be the actual people making the windmills and things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm curious if you could talk to us a little bit about the difference in the tax credits that you propose for wind and biomass versus solar and the cost differential there versus the generation.
Yeah, I mean, so like we point out here, right? Obviously, it's different. Wind and biomass would be cheaper, but it's also for a greater amount of kilowatt hours. The discrepancy, I think, is going to be, again, this was based off of in New Mexico, and I think the reason for, and I'll know, we could have come, I think we could have come here with a bit more fine-tuned estimate on exactly how we're going to give these rebates to different facilities. But I think more importantly is looking at this example and saying, okay, so this is what fit for New Mexico. Within the state of Michigan, we have most of our energy coming from coal. Would it be more beneficial to incentivize more solar or more wind and biomass? And I apologize for not being more prepared and having that answer directly for you now. I think that that's the next question of the process, is figuring out which one is going to be more important going forward.
And that being said, like other states mimicking the New Mexico bill, we found that Arizona created nearly an identical bill in 2010. So we figured it's definitely, like, it has to be working. So
It does. I wish we had New Mexico and Arizona's climate.
Mr. Chair. Couple ones. Thank you for having that cost ready. I do wonder if it's scaled to Michigan. Michigan's a much more populous state. It's got much more heavy industry. I think that power generation costs here would be, will probably scale up quite a bit from 61 million in New Mexico. But thank you for having it ready. I think this would be interesting if there was a made in Michigan requirement for where you purchased your solar cells or your windmills. If you're actually talking about economic development as a tool of this, I think you actually want to look at that. And the concern I have is, though, I think there might be a disconnect between the tax credit. I mean, 61 million in New Mexico is going to be more here. That's a lot of money to invest.
Absolutely.
Are you going to get if you're subsidizing the production, are you really subsidizing the production where you need it? And I'm not familiar enough with power generation, but could you end up having a glut? And it doesn't seem like it, but maybe.
No, I do hear where you're coming from. The Obama administration has made clean energy one of their big things. They have a huge, I can't think of the exact title, it's slipping my mind right now, but they have numerous kind of bullets that they want to hit. They want to see this amount of our energy be this, be clean generation, be solar, be wind, what have you. And with that in mind, then you're looking at, like the Energy Administration. Also, we looked at different international kind of like energy councils. They all forecast that by 2020, 2025, at least a quarter of our generation on the U.S. grid and then international or whatever will be from these clean and renewable energy sources. So, while maybe this exact proposal won't be implemented, but maybe something very similar will be. We just wanted to kind of get out in front of the curve. We see that this is something that will be developing more rapidly and frequently in the next few years. And if Michigan were to, like you said, New Mexico and Arizona, less populous, Michigan, more populous, bigger state, if we were to be kind of a champion of this cause, I think it would be pretty beneficial.
Similarly, we would work it just as New Mexico did on a credit program. So we would set like the maximum that we'd be willing to give out in taxes, and if it goes over that, we give that out in credits for the next year. So you'd have to almost be on the line. So we're not spending more than our budget amount.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to follow up on the chair's original question at the end of your presentation concluded, and having the advantage of speaking with you as your proposal was taking shape. I'm wondering if you could tell if there was any I know that to some degree there was a choice you made between the focus on business as opposed to residential tax incentives. And I wonder if you could share a little about what ultimately took you in the direction of business tax incentives.
If I can just really quickly touch, and then I'll hand it off to Keith. So, one thing that, like I touched on earlier, the handing it off to businesses kind of incentivizes the market side of it, whereas if it's just a homeowner, more people moving in the state probably won't happen because that probably isn't enough to attract a new homeowner, and simply giving them tax credit won't really do much. And then I think Keith's going to touch on it, but say you don't have the money to pay your taxes, but you can, install this wind device and get X amount back, and that you're not paying for taxes that way, so you're getting rebated money and then like that. So you're kind of gaming the system in a way. So in changing away from that point of view, we thought it'd be safer almost to stay away from personal taxes. Keith's good.
On top of that, like what I had up in the problem and what really drew us was that Michigan uses coal 50% of total electricity generation and 30% from nuclear power. So by targeting households, we didn't think that we'd really live with this number because Michigan is such a large manufacturing state. So we want to target businesses and thought it would have a larger effect. Obviously, it's also a much harder proposal.
Nice job, guys. I will say that you did make a choice because there can be a requirement, as Michigan does have right now, for renewables as opposed to an incentive to give what some would call corporate welfare to businesses to do something that they probably should be doing anyway. So you did make a choice, and I commend you on making that choice and making that decision and being able to back it up.
So I think from, by the way, this is another great topic. From a critique standpoint, and I think it sounds like you guys kind of worked on drilling down into a particular problem because it is such a wide topic, and there's just so many different factors that can happen. But I think that from a public policy standpoint, that you probably, to one, kind of focus on a few set of facts, because it's hard to keep all of this generation, all of the different terminology in track, and then the facts are kind of, it depends on who you hear them from. I mean, the one thing with energy policy is that depending on who's in front of you, you can completely tear apart everything. So from a small business perspective, so I have a farm, and we looked into a windmill and putting in a windmill, and it was going to cost us about $400,000. And it would have maybe taken care of my house, my neighbor's house, and that's about it. And then we could have probably generated, because we would have had to put in transmission lines. So you have to do all of these types of activities. And so I think from when we talk about, when Andy talks about corporate welfare, a big part is that 70% of the individuals that use power are from small businesses. And so it's very, when you start getting into these nuances of, how to actually bring those costs down and that type of thing. I think there's some other things that you kind of can drill down on as far, I keep using that word, I don't know why, but they, whether it's the energy companies that will accept that energy and will reimburse small businesses or large businesses. I mean, if you take the University of Michigan, you see all of the solar panels that are around, and that's what you see those on the campus, and then now over by the College of Engineering. A big issue with that is that it still does not generate enough power, but the cost that went into it is phenomenal. So this is a very difficult topic that I think you guys took on, and I think that when folks are deciding what your public policy topic is, understand that when it's almost two. I mean, I think this proposal has been generated about 2 or 3 times in the Michigan legislature, and it's frankly, it's just really, really difficult. So I commend you on that, but next time probably make it a smaller proposal, because I mean,
it's easier to come across. I think one of the larger challenges too is this is a long-term type thing, and it's tough to avoid focusing on short term, especially with
like you said, costs ranging up to $500,000.
Right. I mean, even you look at Germany, who massive leaders, Sweden, and those types of the Baltic areas are extremely proactive, and you still run into massive issues with this type of thing. So even if you have Barack Obama, I mean, you know, you guys of course will be Barack Obama one day, but I'm just saying is that it's just a difficult issue to take on.
And in Michigan, you have a huge problem that the governor is opposed to all tax credits, but that's a whole different story. I have to go to a meeting. I'm going to pass the gavel down to Chair DeVoe here. Good luck, everyone, today, and nice job.
Alright, so the second proposal I'd like to address in the quality of life thematic group is a proposal to mandate later start times in a staggered structure starting at the middle school level and going throughout the high school education level. And the authors for these proposals are Reagan Anderson and Margaret Metzger. So without further ado, I'd like to call both of them up to address this.
Hi, just real quick, if anybody needs this is a really weird question to ask right now. The bathrooms did you guys need, it's a code, and I think it's 2002 is what it is. So just in case anyone was, sorry to start you off on that note.
Thank you. My name is Reagan Anderson. This is Margaret Metzger. We are proposing a mandating of later start times across grades 6 through 12 in the state of Michigan. We believe that this proposal will benefit the lives of students and civilians with little to no cost required from the state. The current average start time in the state of Michigan is 7:54, while the Academy of Pediatrics recommends that the start time no later than 8:30 a.m. So we can see a discrepancy there. We're proposing a staggered start time model under which elementary schools will start at 8 a.m., middle schools at 8:45, and high schools at 9:30. According to the CDC, 6 teenagers die each day due to motor vehicle-related injuries, and one of the 8 leading causes of these accidents is teens that are driving drowsy. Last year alone, over 2,000 students died in the state. This number can be greatly reduced if the start time of school was pushed back by just an hour and a half.
So we did some research, and just last year, the Children's National Medical Center's Blueprint for Change team did a large study on 70 school districts across Florida, Virginia, Massachusetts, and Alaska that have already actually implemented later start times, and they all have seen huge benefits in both health and wellness of their students. Some of the most prominent benefits were increased daily attendance, cost savings, reduced tardiness rates, improved standardized test scores, and improved grades. The APA also suggests that the brain's circadian timing system, which is controlled mainly by melatonin, switches on later at night as puberty progresses. So before puberty, your body makes you sleepy around 8 or 9 p.m. When puberty begins, this rhythm shifts a couple hours later. So now these teens' bodies are telling them to go to sleep around 10 or 11 p.m. The natural shift in this rhythm is called sleep phase delay. The need to sleep is delayed for about 2 hours. If teens resist or ignore this change, there's a lot of negative effects, and it makes the transition through puberty very hard on their bodies.
Additionally, the National Sleep Foundation found that 59% of 6th and 8th graders and 87% of high school students were getting less than the recommended 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep on school nights. And adolescent sleep deprivation is associated with higher numbers of traffic accidents, as we mentioned earlier, disciplinary problems, sleepiness in class, poor concentration, poor grades, depression, ADHD, and unhealthy weight gain.
So we are proposing a staggering start time model. As we said, where elementary schools will start at 8 a.m., middle schools at 8:45, and high schools at 9:30. This is something that could save lives and also improve lives, and it comes at little to no economic cost to the state. In order to create uniformity throughout the state, we suggest that this happens at the statewide level in order to avoid conflict with after-school, extracurricular, and athletic schedules.
The proposal is very interesting. The question I have is on your assumption that it will allow the same buses to be used. Perhaps that's true in a denser district. I'm from Cadillac originally, and my best friend had an hour and a half bus ride each way from Knoxville to Cadillac. So I'm not sure that this will hold true for the more rural parts of the state. So I think that might actually kind of, actually incur costs, but.
Yeah, we did take that into account. Something we also considered is that pushing back a later start time hopefully frees up parents who work, and maybe the possibility that they're now able to take their children to school earlier in the mornings or later in the day, depending on their work schedule.
The parent of someone who's starting middle school next year that'll start at 7:30, I think this sounds fantastic. I know one of the objections that you hear when schools or districts look at this kind of changes about high schools in particular, but even middle schools and the extracurriculars and work, and so how have other jurisdictions handled that change?
So that was one of the issues that a lot of the districts, the study basically, it talked to the district before and it addressed what their concerns were before implementing the start time, and then it kind of showed how they felt after the fact, and all of those worries that they felt were going to be potential problems, they actually, like most of the schools agreed that those worries didn't end up like amounting to anything. So we also felt that, I mean, if you're going to put importance on a child's health and well-being, I think this sleep almost takes precedence over maybe a shorter extracurricular practice or having to share field space between a JV and a varsity team.
Yeah, we also felt that there is the possibility that, at least for high school students, that there could be a block or a period at the end of the day where they're starting their extracurriculars or their sports events earlier than the normal student who has a full course load. And so we thought that could be a potential possibility so that they're not getting done with practice at 8 or 9 and then having to eat dinner and everything.
Also, with the shift in circadian rhythm that we were talking about, it makes sense for high school students to be practicing later at night. I mean, obviously it's 11 p.m., but they don't need to be finishing at 8 p.m. They can maybe get finished at 9 or something because their rhythms are set further back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You in making your case, the two of you have made arguments that fall into the domains of safety issues, of kind of physiological issues, and economic issues. So you covered a wide range of areas. I mean, but I'm curious, and again, as panelists have intuited, as you guys know, part of what you were asked to do is to think about counter arguments. So I'm wondering what the two of you thought was the most compelling counter argument to your proposal and how you would respond to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think busing schedule is definitely something that is one of the biggest counter arguments that we found, and would take this into the realm of costing something to the state, which we originally wasn't our intention with the bill, was our hope that it wouldn't cost anything. And if we can't really find the busing schedule that works with students, it would cost something to the state in terms of buying new buses and making amends to the scheduling. So we found that was the biggest obstacle.
So I think that, first of all, it's a good idea that's based on some probably pretty sound science. I think that you're talking about a bit of a massive cultural shift in the sense of, even if you took a certain kind of population as far as middle income to upper income individuals that, maybe have a stay-at-home parent or have a more flexible work schedule. I think that the issues start to roll into single parent homes, grandparent homes, all of the different diverse types of living situations that we see. Did you guys kind of, I know this has been a major public policy debate in various different states. Was there kind of any place that you saw that there was a pilot program, or that private schools or different types of charters had kind of looked at this already?
Most of our research was done, the research was from this large study that was on the 70 school districts. It covered approximately 1,000 schools, so there was a lot of data, but it wasn't broken down into like charter or private schools. It kind of just covered overall data. And there's another study that was done in Minnesota, at the University of Minnesota, and it tracked 9,000 students in 8 public schools in Minnesota, Colorado, and Wyoming. And that's had some of the same benefits, but just improving grades in math, English, and science. But
Did they actually have the kids, like, did they have a set that came in at a certain time, or how, do you know how the studies kind of?
The studies were done on schools that had already implemented a later start time.
We do recognize that it is a huge cultural shift, and we think that's one of the reasons why it hasn't been implemented thus far, is we do foresee this having to happen across statewide for it to be successful. So this can't be something that just private schools or just public schools enact, because it would throw off timetable schedules and stuff like that.
And I think it's also probably a little bit of a socioeconomic issue, because of the fact that, you know, especially in single parent homes or folks that don't have as the benefits of a more flexible work schedule. I was just listening to NPR this morning about the Detroit bus system, and the bus is running about half an hour behind. For those individuals that don't have a car or have a limited level of transportation, this starts to become, you know, if you get your kid to the bus at 9, but your bus doesn't come until 9:30, it starts to become also from socioeconomic, but also a fiscal impact on the school district to come up with alternative methods. I mean, this is why after school programs have been started. This is why before school programs have been started. I think in just the Lansing School District, in some of the schools, I think almost over 75% of the kids are on 2 to 3 meals a day at the school district. So you really, there's a lot more, there's a lot bigger problems, and I think the cultural shift would just be really, really difficult. But it is, I mean, of course, hey, I wish work would start, I wish the legislature started at 10 o'clock every night. So anyways, but I commend you on this one. And does anybody have any other questions?
Oh, they do start at 10, so
Oh, yeah, yes. It depends on what committees you have. So, anything else? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the safety and equity theme group, we have Allison Schneider and Henry Glick.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Allison Schneider, and this is Henry Glick, and we're the topic coordinators for the Safety and Equity Thematic Group. The main question we ask in all of our discussions is, what protections do we need to make sure the world is fair and safe enough for students in Michigan? Some of the subtopics discussed in this group include public safety, food safety, and the justice system.
Okay, so some of the honorable mentions from our thematic area include regulating doctors and prescription painkillers, raising the tobacco age to 21, and mandatory self-defense classes in high school. But the first proposal we're talking about today from our thematic area is Underage Tanning in Michigan by Angel Sanito and Brittany Swartz. So without further ado, here they are.
Hi, I'm Brittany Swartz. I'm Angel Sanita. So in the state of Michigan, currently minors are able to tan with consent from a parent and guardian, and this issue may seem isolated to a small demographic group of Asian girls. However, girls and boys both take part in indoor UV tanning. In fact, Michigan's largest indoor tanning salon, the chain Tan Fastest customer base is 40% male. Indoor tanning is more prevalent among lower socioeconomic status, but they're less informed on the risks of indoor tanning. Michigan specifically is one of the top 3 states with the highest number of tanning salons per capita, which is due to the long winter season and lack of natural sunlight.
There is clear and compelling evidence that adolescent indoor UV tanning greatly increases the risk of melanoma, the deadliest form of skin cancer. 20 years ago, it was very unusual to see women in their late teens and 20s with melanoma. Today, women in their late teens and 20s are constantly getting diagnosed with melanoma, and almost all of them have an extensive tanning bed history. It doesn't take an extensive tanning bed history, though, to develop melanoma. Research indicates 76% of melanomas in people 16 to 29 years of age can be attributable to just one session of tanning device use. In recent years, melanoma has become the leading cause of cancer death in women 25 to 30 years old, and the second leading cause of cancer death in women 30 to 35 years old. The issue of underage tanning and parental consent is similar to the issue of underage use of tobacco. The risks of tobacco use in minors are well known, and because of this, minors are unable to purchase tobacco regardless of parental consent.
Because of these alarming facts, our proposal would eliminate indoor UV tanning for anyone under the age of 18, making it illegal similar to tobacco. Similar legislation was already proposed in the state of Michigan in 2013. However, our proposal expands on the 2013 legislation and adds additional limitations, including users over the age of 18 signing a waiver every 6 months acknowledging the risk of skin cancer, checking identification of every UV bed use, and imposing fines on salons if they do not follow these regulations.
12 states have already made underage tanning illegal. This change does not impose any significant additional costs on the state and will not significantly impact the indoor tanning industry because it will have no impact on spray tans, which are offered at almost every indoor tanning salon. Additionally, spray tans have a higher profit margin than indoor UV tanning beds, so if salons are selling more spray tans, profits could potentially increase. Overall, we believe this proposal is very important because it's an easy, cost-free way for the state of Michigan to protect the lives of minors. Any questions?
Mike?
I know you said that this probably wouldn't cost anything to the state, but you do talk about tanning salons being subject to fines. So someone's going to have to monitor those tanning salons, and how do, I guess, who's supposed to do that? Is it someone from the health department that goes by every year? Because that is going to cost the state money.
Yeah, in our proposal, we were thinking that someone from the health department would do kind of an annual audit of tanning salons to see, since we're imposing that they would have to check identification every time a customer came to use an indoor UV tanning bed and log that. So we were thinking a yearly audit, which does have some cost, but it's not incurring any additional significantly costly programs. That on the state.
How many, did you guys mention how many tanning places are in the state? Because that would probably be more than just one person that would have to work on that.
We don't have that number, but.
Are the tanning beds or tanning salons licensed in Michigan? I don't know.
Yes, they do have to become licensed to have any UV beds. The issue is there isn't any follow-up or any sort of further regulation beyond the licensing of the tanning beds. That there is a state mandated document that each new customer has to sign. And if you are under the age of 18 in Michigan, you do have to have a parent or guardian present. And so what our proposal is proposing is just completely eliminating indoor tanning for minors. So regardless if they bring a parent or guardian or whomever, they cannot participate in indoor tanning.
Is there any medical need for UV exposure for minors at all? Seasonal affective disorder, anything else where there could be therapeutic use, however unlikely it might be?
There are, some doctors still do prescribe UV tanning use for seasonal depression, and some doctors that aren't very informed on the risk of melanoma even will send people there for acne, which is not a very effective treatment, but there are way more health conscious ways to combat this in the exact same manner. There's red lamps that do not give any UV exposure that's harmful at all. So there are completely safe alternatives.
Great. And the second question I had, what's your source on the 75% melanomas being attributed to one?
That's the CDC.
Thank you.
So the state, I guess, trying to think of the question. For those other states that banned it, where were they geographically? Was it kind of southern states, or did it really?
No, there's a lot of northern states.
Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Oregon, Texas, Vermont, California. It's all over the country. It wasn't really a pattern of exactly.
Okay. Well, I commend you on this one as well as, well, I won't let everyone know when I went to college, but it was a serious issue. There were, one of the things that I think that needs that would need to be addressed, whether, and this came up when Michigan did the parental request mandate, that the problem was turned into that you could get a request, you could get permission from a particular place, but then you would go to 2 or 3 in one day. And that it became somewhat of an addiction in the sense of that some of the kids were going, or some of the folks, it was, and it also, again, another cultural shift is it was a parental issue. And I think there needs to be more awareness regarding the acne, because I think people still believe that significantly. And it actually is very effective. The issue is does the effect, help? I'm sure smoking is very effective at calming certain people down, but probably it's still not good.
Yeah.
So, and a bottle of wine probably is very nice for me at night, but it probably is not a good idea to continue doing all the time. So, okay, great, thank you.
So our next proposal we'll be talking on the platform is e-cigarette regulation for minors and advertising by Mackenzie Connolly and Brooks Schools.
Good morning, my name is Mackenzie. I'm Brooke, and we're here to talk about e-cigarettes. So in recent years, e-cigarettes have been gaining popularity and demand. Specifically, between 2013 and 2014, usage among middle and high school students tripled. And in these years, e-cigarette usage surpassed conventional cigarette usage. This is an especially alarming statistic because e-cigarette campaigns promote dangerous misconceptions. These campaigns often use cartoons, celebrities, and sports to display glamour, health, and sex appeal regarding the e-cigarettes. And these campaigns do not market the product as an aid to quit conventional cigarette smoking, which these products were originally introduced as. Additionally, e-cigarette companies are creatively drawing in the young market by offering fruity flavor varieties and different color varieties of the different paraphernalia.
So the main problem that we're addressing with our proposal is the lack of regulation that is currently in place in regards to these e-cigarettes. E-cigarettes are typically viewed as safer versions of tobacco cigarettes. However, they are known to contain nicotine and harmful chemicals that are addictive and linked to diseases such as cancer and more recently linked to emphysema. So over the past few years, there's been lots of progress made in reducing the amount of youth that are smoking cigarettes. However, this progress is being threatened by e-cigarette usage among young people. Currently, the Family Smoking and Prevention Tobacco Control Act regulates tobacco products in ways such as age requirement, distribution, marketing, manufacturing regulations. However, e-cigarettes are not controlled by this act, even with their similarity to tobacco cigarette products.
So to solve this issue, we propose that e-cigarette companies are prohibited from directly targeting young people. We will make this happen by regulating e-cigarette advertisement locations and also advertisement content. So as for location, we believe that it would be most effective to ensure that ads were not within 500 feet of public elementary, middle, and high schools. And as for content, we believe that the e-cigarette companies should not use minors and or cartoons as subjects of the ads. And additionally, the advertisements must have a part in them that mentions the risks and dangers posed by the product.
One of the secondary goals of our proposal is to further include e-cigarettes into high school health education programs. I know growing up, I was always taught about tobacco products and marijuana and all those drugs, as gateway drugs, throughout high school, middle school, and all that. However, e-cigarettes are never mentioned, and as they become more of a popular product and as more dangers and facts are known about them, we want to include them into health education programs. And although we're not sure about the exact cost of regulating e-cigarettes and their advertising, one
issue that might arise would be that businesses would lose revenue on these products. However, we believe that the safety, like promoting safety, and would be more important than these revenue streams. With that, questions?
Thank you, ladies, and I'll ask if any of the panelists would like to ask questions.
There's really no age restrictions on the sales of e-cigarettes, and
In May 2015, there was a proposal of a bill that would prohibit the sale of e-cigarettes to minors, and it was passed by the Senate. However, it's still not officially passed. And also, in other states, there are regulations, however, not in Michigan.
Yes.
When you say in other states there are regulations, what kind of things? I'm thinking about some of these advertising restrictions, and I know in terms of tobacco, that's tended to have been at the federal level.
Yeah, it's mostly about the regulating sales to minors currently. I don't think that states there have been ideas to address the advertising within states. However, it is mostly addressed at the federal level and through the FDA, but nothing officially has been passed. States typically just focus on sales to minors and limiting that to 18.
I'm just wondering, in terms of the advertising, did you do any research in terms of where it's most effective? Because I'm thinking there's billboards, schools and so forth, but then there's all the media that people have online and so forth. I'm just wondering if you have any indication of that.
Right, so these e-cigarette companies, they definitely advertise both traditional media forms like the billboards that you've mentioned, as well as social medias. So we mentioned that we would prohibit the e-cigarettes from advertising on specific locations, which we believe would help fix the traditional advertisement issue with the billboards. And then as with the content, we don't really have the ability to determine what goes on people's social medias and what they're viewing. We believe that the content aspect of this proposal would help fix that issue.
So you said that there's no current age limit in Michigan. So why, I like your proposal. I agree with that. It sounds like it's something that we did with tobacco back in the day, but why not focus on setting an age limit in Michigan and providing penalties?
We wanted to do that, but we wanted to take it further. Initially, we were focusing on just the age limit. However, because it has been proposed before, we wanted to take it further because we think that focusing on advertising will help broaden the scope of the effect that the law has. But definitely, we definitely want to see a law enacted about the age limit.
I don't know, I just raised my hand myself. Are e-cigarettes taxed, or how is it similar to regular cigarettes then?
Well, right now, so e-cigarettes are not really considered a tobacco product, and although tobacco products, although a lot of them are regulated under specific federal laws that we know, and the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act. Something that we had thought about in creating this proposal was adding e-cigarettes to this act and expanding it to not only include tobacco, but also nicotine products, because the research does show that nicotine can drive addictions to tobaccos and drive conventional cigarette usage as well. So right now, the state and different laws don't really look at them as similar products, and they're definitely two separate entities, but we believe it would be beneficial to kind of combine them right now. So. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, again, just to sort of go inside in terms of the process, I'd be interested in which of your consultants that you found most impactful in terms of your thinking on the proposal. If you could give us a little bit of the background on that.
Okay. Well, we spoke to a doctor. She's a general practitioner from the state of Ohio, but we took her medical opinion as valuable to our proposal. We spoke to her to see what she thought about e-cigarettes and the impact and the health impacts that they have, and she kind of agreed with us with the fact that although they're kind of deemed as a way to quit smoking and considered safer, there's really not enough research on them currently to allow them to go to minors and that kind of thing. So her medical opinion kind of really influenced us because it helped us realize that there are health implications
and dangers with this product that we wanted to address. Bob?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your first bullet, you say that e-cigarette usage has tripled among middle and high school students from 2013 to 2014. What are the actual percentages or usage rates? So if it's, I mean, these are fairly recent inventions. It's tripling from 1%, 3%, that kind of care.
Yeah, well, I'm not exactly sure about that exact statistic, but I do know that 13% of high school students in America have do use e-cigarettes. So it's not a 1 to 3%; it's over 10%.
And I actually do like the proposal, but your example of add restrictions on college campuses, I think would be, that's a matter up to the boards, but hopefully the boards would agree to, kind of, I think they would understand why they would be interested to do it.
Out of curiosity, do you guys see people doing e-cigarettes? We are not hanging out any place cool enough for anyone to be doing e-cigarettes. I saw one at the stadium one time.
It's definitely a popular product. I know when I was in high school, it was very popular amongst a lot of people because that's when kids are experimenting a lot with drugs and thinking it's cool. So it's definitely a common thing. One of our conversations was with a college student who has friends who have started using e-cigarettes and then became big tobacco cigarettes following that. So it's definitely a common thing that we see around our age group.
Just to answer your question, from the school district in which I teach, we've had issues with it. One is because it's easily used in a classroom with 35 students if the teacher doesn't understand what the strawberry smell from the back of the room might be. And it's also, it was easily orderable online. That's not banned at all. So 14-year-old can go online, order 2 or 3 e-cigarettes, have it delivered to the house, parents aren't paying attention, they bring them to school. So it became an issue within our district for a while, and the school board had to change the school board policy for e-cigarettes to be considered the same as tobacco because the state has been dragging its feet on classifying. So we had to do it locally to try and actually have some discipline around the issue.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Great, thanks. Okay, the next group is the Opportunity Thematic Group. The coordinators are Katie, Muriel, and Michael.
Hi, thank you very much again for being here with us. My name is Michael, this is Katie, and we're the Opportunity Thematic Topic Coordinators. So the main question we tried to answer throughout the semester was how can we make sure that all students in Michigan have enough opportunities to gain valuable skills, create a basis for building financial resources, and live fulfilling lives. Some of the more specific topics were the tax system, education, and job prospects, and more. We had a variety of very good proposals, but the 2 winning ones were implementing drug and alcohol education in high schools and a pilot program for music education in school.
So first up, we have Julie Kesselpot presenting on implementing further drug and alcohol education in high school.
As they're coming up, I just wanted to observe, it's interesting that all the discussion topics for taxes, entrepreneurship, banking loan, your proposals are focused on essentially youth care and education, and it's really interesting to see focusing on the K-12.
Hi, I'm Julie Kessa, and my proposal is to implement drug and alcohol education into the health curriculum in high schools. Currently in the state of Michigan, high school students are only required to take 1/2 credit of health, and there's no specific curriculum for these health classes. While teachers are recommended to teach drug and alcohol education, they're not required to. And after looking at the syllabuses for a lot of different health classes in high school, I was able to find that a lot of classes did have drug and alcohol education, but they also included a lot of different topics, including CPR, sexual education, and proper diet and nutrition, all into this 1/2 credit class. This is an issue because many students do not know how drugs and alcohol affect them. Also, those who start using are more likely to drop out of school, which has a likelihood of leading to unemployment and crime. This is a problem because people who use addictive substances before 15 are 6.5 times more likely to develop a substance abuse disorder than those who wait until they're 21 when it's legal. In the state of Michigan, 41% of high school students categorized as substance drinkers, and 68.1% of high school students do not see marijuana as a harmful drug. My solution is to have students take 1 credit of health education, with 1 half credit their freshman year and 1 half credit any year thereafter. This will allow teachers to focus more time on certain topics and give students more in-depth knowledge in certain health subjects. I also suggest that the curriculum must have drug and alcohol education in the health curriculum. I also suggested that the schools survey students once a year at the beginning of each year to see what drugs and alcohol are common on their campuses. They can tailor their health programs towards their students. And the surveys will also be a good measure to see how effective their program has been year to year. Finally, I suggested that each school holds 1 assembly each year where a speaker talks about how drugs and alcohol have negatively affected their life or has negatively affected the lives of someone they know. Through my consultations, I was able to find that the power of assemblies seems to be very effective and is often more engaging than in-class learning. In terms of costs, schools that only require 1 half credit of health education will have to hire more teachers, which can cost up to $50,000 a year per teacher. But currently it costs around $255 million a year for medical costs for underage drinking alone. So overall, it will be very cost efficient to implement this program. And if you have any questions.
Mike?
My concern is probably less in the cost of a teacher, but, and it's not much of a concern. I think your proposal is good, but, the school days are already pretty packed. So when you're adding things in, you're inevitably have to take things out. So I think that's where I just see a challenge in trying to implement this, kind of in the statewide, level. But, again, I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie, I'm wondering if you, in your research, came across programs that existed in other places that seem to be perhaps models for the kind of thing you might like to see taking place in Michigan?
So I looked at New Jersey and Rhode Island because they both had really good rates for low underage drinking and drugs in the state. And currently in both states, they require high school students to take more than 1 half credit in health education. And they have specific curriculums for their health education, which include drug and alcohol learning. In New Jersey specifically, the amount of people that have used marijuana in high school is 3% below the national average. And in Rhode Island, the amount of high school students who've had at least 1 drink in the last 30 days was 6% below the national average. So it shows that teaching students the harms of drugs and alcohol is actually very effective.
To clarify, in exchange for doubling the health curriculum, they only achieved a 3% and a 6% drop compared to the average?
Well, they didn't double their health curriculum. They've always had this as their curriculum, but I was able to find that ones that did teach students more about drugs and alcohol and harms of it had lower rates for underage drinking and underage drug use.
I guess I would put the question to it, I think we're something that Mike would, given the Michigan academic standards and American curriculum, what would you drop?
Well, through my past, in high school, my classes, we would have gym for 3/4 of the year and then health for the other 4th of the year. So I would suggest having less physical education and having part of the year is health education.
A half credit is a semester, if I recall, correct? So you weren't even getting a full half credit of health ed.
So in terms of that, if we had 2 half credits, they could do 1 half year of physical education, 1 half year of health, and then 2 full years of physical education and another half year of physical education, half year of health.
But the current phys ed requirement in the state, if I recall, is just a half credit, I believe. So if you extend that up 12 years, the question we're getting at is, the requirements call for, 2 full years of math, 4 full years of English. I mean, it's quite detailed. So, you add on anything, it gets to get squeezed out.
So, Julie, I think that one, we've all lived through from a public policy standpoint that, drug cessation and cessation programs are, they're extremely difficult to kind of focus on what exactly are the problems and what exactly are the solutions. I think from your proposal standpoint, a survey is actually something that really, it does go on, I think, in individual school districts, but I think that that was something that you could probably focus on more, is looking at a school district providing, I mean, clearly they would have to be private and anonymous and that type of thing. And maybe looking at, instead of, we talked about with the e-cigarette program, I mean, the kid, when you put students, K through 12 students, and clearly not, hopefully not the K part, for the high schoolers, in a classroom setting together, and you're discussing drugs and alcohol, it's actually been proven to be extremely effective at educating kids on what is a good idea, what is, some of the ideas on how to participate in drug and alcohol use. And I think that the best part of your proposal is the survey. And I think that that's something that, if you move forward with this, is to look at school districts and how they would implement a survey and kind of focus on their program. So whether it's through social media, other types of techniques, because a lot of this is drug and alcohol is focused on, maybe issues that are going on at home, issues that are going on with peer pressure, those types of activities. And because drug and alcohol education classes have been, I think, proven time and time again, it's one of the reasons why we don't see them mandated as much, because they just are not, it's very difficult to focus on how they're effective. And I think the New Jersey example, I think if we were really to get, if you were to have some experts, not, just reading what's in the paper, kind of look at some of those statistics, I think you would start to see that there's different socioeconomic issues. I think there's different cultural types of things that are going on that maybe not see. But otherwise, I mean, drug and alcohol cessation programs are good, are a good idea. But I think the survey is actually the best part of your proposal, because I don't think that it is something that, I think it is something that a state could probably be very helpful to school districts on, in the sense of coming up with a standard survey, understanding what are the right questions to ask in order to really figure out what's happening culturally in your school district. Any other? Okay, great.
Sorry. It's me again. The I had, kind of building off what Rebecca had, there's a bill coming up today at noon for a hearing that would repeal all academic standards in the state and eliminate essentially the specified curriculum in the state. And that's sponsored by folks who are actually on the higher ed committee, co-sponsored. The challenges we have are that there is a very strong notion of local control in the state. And I think that, leaving aside the part where you have to find what you're going to drop students in, I think what that's really getting at is you'd have to convince, the local leaders of government and local school districts to view the curriculum as being up to them. I'm fine with centralizing entire curriculum learning at Lansing, but most people would not agree with me. And so how would you, bearing that in mind, how would you kind of try to sell this to policymakers that way?
Is this in terms of like the survey, like having like local levels?
I think that might be a stronger way.
Well, I think the most important thing, like I've talked to my past health teacher, and she told me currently where she's working, like marijuana and like also like heroin are becoming a lot cheaper and becoming bigger issues there. So it's important for her to focus on those issues. So locally, if they could find out what the biggest like drugs and alcohol problems are in their school district, that they can tailor to prevent kids from starting to use those, rather than just focusing on all drugs and alcohol in general, when some of them might not even be an issue in where they are.
Great. Thank you.
Lastly, we have Brianna Thing. for music education in schools.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for being here. So, yeah, my name is Priya Singh, and I'll be proposing the implementation of a pilot program for music education in schools. So, music education yields countless benefits. It stimulates the brain activity, it promotes creativity, and accelerates students on this learning curve, which results in higher IQ scores, higher test scores, and also higher likelihoods of future success. And at-risk schools have shown to have the most return on investments for these educational programs, which leads to lower dropout rates and conversely increased graduation rates. So Michigan currently faces an issue with academic achievement failing to hit national standards. So according to 2014 and 2015 ACT college readiness results, less than 40% of Michigan students have met ACT benchmarks in reading, mathematics, and science. And also for 2013 and 2014, graduation rates have surpassed 78% in Michigan, but has failed to hit the U.S. national graduation rate of 81%. But granted, Michigan's graduation rates has been on an upward trend, but even still, we are below the the national average, which is ultimately what we're trying to strive for. And due to state budget cuts, music education programs have been cut across the state because often seen as secondary to STEM subjects. But music education can actually be a great complement to STEM subjects and promote learning development in ways that offer more tangible, intangible skills that can be applied to all different areas. So this is a graph that shows our education policy summary of all states in the United States. The main takeaway is that columns 3, 4, and 5, the elementary standards and middle school, high school requirements, Michigan fails to hit. Michigan has no implementation of our education requirements, whereas 48 to 45 and 42 of other states do have requirements, and Michigan lacks in this regard. And also, they did not define art as a core academic subject. And that's why a pilot program should be implemented at 5 at-risk schools in the state of Michigan, ranging from rural to urban to suburban areas, and 5 because it's a scalable number that won't require an excessive amount of funding. And the programs will be chosen, and the schools that will be chosen will have to qualify for Title I funding, which means that 40% or more of the students are eligible for free or reduced lunch. And the program will be spanning 3 to 5 years, and the funding will be designated under the auspices of the Michigan Department of Education. And this will be an after-school program, so it won't conflict with, it won't compete for schedule space in the student schedule. An assessment will be given during at the end of 3 to 5 years to gauge the learning progression of the students that will be affected by music education. So ultimately, this program will be implemented only at 5 schools. The funding will be relatively low, and it could accelerate learning development for students, which would ultimately set these students on a brighter path for the future. Thank you.
Erin? Was there a particular age range that you expected to focus the program at?
Yes, so this was supposed to be K through 12, but because we think that there's greater return investments for elementary, that if they were to choose specific schools, focus more on elementary and possibly progression of the 3 to 5 years that leads into middle school.
Actually, Brianna, it looks like you're the last one on the agenda, and this is scheduled to go to 12:30, so I hope you've got some. I actually quite like the pilot study. It's nice. The cynic in me wonders, as I'm sure you can't help it, it's cynical at all. Why would you have a pilot study if there's a very low likelihood of actually expanding it statewide?
The goal of the pilot program is to keep funding relatively low and to prove that there is a learning growth achievement that students will be able to get after the implementation of the program.
And just to show that students will accelerate for all aspects of different subjects, not just music education, that will ultimately help Michigan graduation rates, and then through the pilot program, hopefully be implemented to a statewide program.
But I think that's my question. I think because of the funding involved in scaling this from a pilot to a statewide deployment, it would be a Herculean lift to actually talk about that. So is there a point to doing a pilot if the likelihood of it being implemented is very low?
Yes, I'm confused. What is the reason for why the implementation of the program would be low?
Because the reason you do a pilot is to determine something works.
Right.
We're trying to gather information. But I think you have to do it you should only do it if you're operating in good faith. And if you're having a pilot in the state looking at, the state doesn't adequately fund K-12 as it is for its current curriculum, for its current, operations, to actually expect the state to expand this to a full implementation is unlikely. So therefore, why would you do the test and get this pilot program, get everyone's hopes up if you don't think it's actually going to go statewide?
The program will hopefully, like I said, just to show that there are tangible benefits, and even if it can't reach statewide, hopefully at least be implemented at these at-risk schools, because there is a great return on investment. So even though it may not be a statewide implementation, hopefully eventually it will get there. But as of now, it is to be directed towards at-risk schools and hopefully increasing graduation risk there.
I think when you do a pilot program or you start to develop it, whatever the goals or objectives are, is that you want to make sure that there is a step process. So you're starting out at 3 to 5 schools, keeping it realistic, focusing on specific needs, that type of thing. I actually think that by having it as an after-school program is probably less effective because of the fact that you end up bringing in the kids that one would want to do it, or their parents just need a babysitter. So if you're going to have a school that is going, that you would create some type of incentive for that school to have some kind of program during the school day. Of course, that starts getting into all the other issues that we discussed previously with Julie. But I think that when you're doing a pilot, you want to start with, this year we're doing 3 to 5 schools. We're going to wait for these types of results, and then our goal is to move into 10 schools and expand it. So I think that's kind of where, because you're kind of jumping to, we don't think it'll go to all of the schools, but we don't know what's going to happen. I think you need to, when developing the program, you have to have steps in there. So that's the one thing.
Did you do any research on what, I guess, currently at-risk areas do you have music education or arts education, and how beneficial they are? I know there's a couple of schools, specifically in Detroit, that actually happen to be some of the top performing schools in the city. So that might be a way to look at what they're doing and how they're doing it outside of that pilot. It is part. I know there's a visual applied performing arts in the Michigan American curriculum. So I do see this as a valid proposal. I think the challenge is how do you get it to go K through 12. I actually worked on this issue a number of years ago, and that was the challenge of getting to go K. We were able to go in high school, but I think probably back with a little bit more data too on some of the benefits of music education and arts education that I think might help too. It might open up a few people's eyes. It's outside of just higher IQ scores. But I would also look at just some of the schools that were already doing this in the state, because you might find out that I think outside of wanting to do a pilot program, you might just go to some of these schools, take a look at the model that they have, and see where you can replicate that model by fitting it to each specific district, whatever they'd be interested in.
Brandon, did you find any charter schools that had a music emphasis or other types of private schools that had music as an emphasis?
Yeah, so I spoke with Lynn Malinoff of the EMU's Bright Futures program, and they actually have a program called Strings for Kids. It's a very relatively small program where it is an after-school kind of activity for our students, but there's very low funding for this program and very low demand because only 6 to 8 violins are offered. So there's a lack of funding in this area, and they require they require volunteers to help facilitate the program. So I wanted to
MSC schools or what school district, or do they have to come, do the students have to come to Eastern?
No, I think the main one is like relatively close to Eastern because music students from EMU will be volunteering there, but I think it is in other schools that are involved as well.
Any other questions?
Rebecca.
Oh, wow.
Hi. Do you have any insight on, I'm looking at this chart here of the state comparisons. We have fewer programs than Mississippi, Alabama, West Virginia, but our graduation rates are higher. Do you think that poses a challenge to the association between arts education and graduation outcomes?
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to strive for is that states like New Hampshire, New Jersey, Oklahoma, they do have these programs and their graduation rates are high, and we're trying to strive for increasing our graduation rates to be above the national average. I don't have the statistics for what the graduation rates for the state that you mentioned this time.
They're all lower.
What's that?
They're lower.
Okay, so, but yeah, so that's what I'm interested in.
I don't have any other questions. With that.
Thank you. Couple quick things before we thank our panelists. First of all, for the panelists, just to let you know in your handout, you got some examples of some of the things that the students have done to supplement and feed the proposal work. That proposals that all of them wrote, 2 of them, in areas like health, education, hunger relief, patient shelter, and animal protection. They were also participated in town halls around issues of water safety, public service provision in Detroit, and prison reform. I would also say more globally that all the people that you see here, even though only a few actually presented proposals, were all involved in the honing and discussion of these proposals and ultimately chose them to represent the broader picture of the work that they've done. For the students, a couple of quick announcements. First of all, know that your T-Tool site will be open later this afternoon so that you can begin submitting your portfolios, which are due by Thursday at 11:55. You should also know that the platform that you all contributed to has been sent to a variety of elected officials and agency heads some of whom very much wanted to be here, but because of conflicts with business going on here in the State House, weren't able to attend. We want you to know that we want to ask you humbly as a faculty member and have all the faculty, if you would please fill out course evaluations. Today's the last day. So as you're making your way through your other business, we'd be grateful to have your feedback on the course and how it works and how it might work better. And finally, when you leave in a moment, we ask that you please also sign out the way you signed in.
Please look around you, and if there's any cups or detritus, please pick them up and remove them. Thank you.
Okay, so before you leave, we want to take a moment to acknowledge Mr. Latfish, Mr. Murphy, Ms. Shore, Representative Shore, and our chair, Mr. Booth, for their service today. Right on stage, please.
Absolutely. I'm sure this for you guys. Well, it is. They're